So welcome everybody. This is Artist Talk on Art. We are 501(c), the ATOA. We do Monday open studios every Monday. We've had great groups and great dialogue. We invite you all to come on any Monday and share your art. And it becomes a very exciting time to hear everybody present. We have a nice group today. And today is a special Monday. We have a special presentation from two artists in the En Foco exhibit that's currently going on. Battice and Danny Peralta are with us here, and we're going to have a focused presentation by both of them. I will ask them some questions, and we'll just have some open dialogue. And feel free, I mean, yes, if you don't want us to hear what's going on where you are, mute your microphone. But if you at any point want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and, feel free to ask a question or just to give a thought out. Often if you want to make a lot of times when people want to ask questions, they're really making statements, and statements are fine. That's totally fine. Share your thoughts at any time. Our website is atoanyc.org, and I just want to welcome you all. It is Artists Talking on Art. We have two artists that are presenting, and first, just a round of applause for Tao and Danny. These guys, I was lucky just to meet them, and we went over some questions. I really did not know them before. We had a great time, and we're going to try and recreate that experience, and as we sort of introduce them to you. I'm going to start with Danny, and I'm just going to ask Danny to tell us a little bit about the exhibition, Danny, the title and whatnot, and just as an intro, because you know it much better than I do. So, Danny, go ahead and welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It's good to see a lot of friends and new people on here. It's really an honor. I'll tell you what I know about the exhibit. I know it's an idea that has been floating around for a couple of years now. And I know it was to include the work of several different artists, part of the En Foco collection, if I'm not mistaken. My body of work is one of these bodies of work that's about narratives, again, that are being, what do they call it, reconstructing narratives, right? And the concept, again, that, that our narratives belong to us, that we're constantly changing them, that you construct them, that you reconstruct them, but really, again, that they come from a very specific place. And that they should be seen and heard, and I wish I had it, but I didn't bring the script out for that part of it, but I know how our work plays together for sure,
Tao, tell us a little bit about your view of the exhibition and a little introduction about yourself.
Pleasure, everyone. So happy to be here and honored, and good to see you. So Dos Mundos, for me, I mean, literally in Spanish, it means two worlds. So, I thought about the ways that I could read that, them and us and them, the others and the mainstream, the periphery and the center. And so, when they first asked me to show, I kind of thought of a project I'm doing in Brazil right now, Chalcabella Revela. In Portuguese, it means her hair reveals her. And so I thought of showing being a Black woman and being Brazilian at the same time. And they said, no, we like your old work from St. Kitts, where I was born, La Amiga Love. And so to show my island people. And so I said, you know what? Yes, I'll show that. I mean, it's a body of work I have not touched in 7 years, hoping to get back to it soon. But it is where I'm from, and it's very real to me. And so I was honored to show. I mean, I think of like, hey, the first world, the mainstream world, and then my little Caribbean that I can share with everyone. And so I was honored, and I am honored to be a part of this show.
Now, Tao, you also teach, yes?
Yes.
You're teaching where? And
yes, I teach at City University. So I've taught over the years at City College, John Jay. Right now I'm at Gutman Community College in Midtown. I guess they say lecturer of interdisciplinary studies. So I'm a nerd of many things. Photography happens to be one of them. So that's, that's what got me here.
When did you start being a photographer, photographing?
Seriously in photography, 2008. And I started with a personal project, and I would say a project called Harlem in Flux, where between 2008 and 2015, I photographed 350 strangers on the streets of Harlem, but I also interviewed them, so it became sort of visual ethnography or visual anthropology. And that's really a lot of the work that I do now. So when I work overseas, this is mainly what I do. But I would say after 2008, by 2009, I was shooting professionally, a lot of private commissions, and which I still do. But the thing to me that I put out to the world are my personal projects.
Danny, tell us a little bit how you started off in photography or in the arts in general, and a little bit about your sort of prehistory, your background.
Sure. Yeah, so I was born in the Bronx, and I was raised in Inwood, and I came up in the 80s and the 90s in New York City. And I was, I guess, always an artist, or always did things that artists did, but never considered myself an artist, right? So I kind of went and did all the formal education things. Very fortunate to have gotten some good education, and then moved on to professional life. And I said, you know what, I need to do something as a venue to kind of release what the hell I'm working on. And at the time I was a teacher, and I said, you know what, I need something to kind of, for my creative side. And I picked up the camera. This is in the year 2000, fall of 2000, about 20 years ago now, almost to the day. I could probably tell you about the camera. And the idea was to kind of use it as a tool. Originally I didn't know what kind of tool, but I knew it was a tool to kind of do something. And at the time I thought it was just capturing, stories of my friends and my family. For myself. I didn't think of it originally as something that was intended for like public use. And then I found this place called The Point, and I found this place called ICP at The Point, particularly in 2000 and I think 2. And from there I learned black and white photography in the darkroom, and again, learned from a lot of great photographers and work with people like Frank Fournier and Joseph Rodriguez, and got to do stuff with Jamel Shabazz. I mean, just a list of people that were doing the work with a particular lens, and they knew that the camera and the ability to tell stories is a vehicle, again, for some sort of dialogue and hopefully some sort of change. And I wanted to kind of do that. And similar to Taya, I was very interested in making that personal story a part of that. So I've done the commercial photography thing. I've shot for people, but I've never quit my day job, if you will, to kind of pursue storytelling by others, by the edits of others. I've really done all this work primarily on my own, and again, working with other people and in collective with artists that we support each other and building community through the camera and through image making. And that's kind of been my career, and it really is parallel to my work at The Point as executive director, where you kind of look at what's happening in the community, and you start to reclaim it, and you start to look at the assets, and you start to look at the beauty of it all. And the camera has always been a tool, again, for myself to navigate to a neighborhood like Hunts Point, which is very interesting and has a lot of different layers and dynamics, and allowed me to kind of create bodies of work, again, that were talking about what was happening there, but also, again, just from a very personal place. Nothing nothing assigned. It was all self-prescribed, and again, a real journey, a real search,
Now being an executive director, obviously is very time consuming and involves a lot of administrative work. How do you balance your career as an executive director? And for those that don't know, The Point is a critical community development center, a CDC in Hunts Point, that at times there could be 10 organizations that are housed inside The Point, and they're constantly rotating. It's a very dynamic space. Visual arts, great photography. I've seen gymnastics there. There's so much going on. It is an active space. And to be managing something like that, how does that interact or distract from your art?
That's a very good question. I think that whether or not I like it or not, both of them feed each other in many, many ways. And I think that I think a lot about like my practice as like administrative services in an organization and playing a role, that is like needed, so that other people can kind of function. And so I think about community development, like I think about a photo project, like I don't know, an essay. You have 24 images. You're thinking about, again, how to like weave the story and how to like build this narrative. And doing community work is very similar. It's just plucking all these stories and working with people to help tell like this one kind of story or to tell multiple stories. And it's photography is a respite for me at times. Photography, again, allows me to dig deeper sometimes into my community work, step back from it. So it's all very much related. And I think that if I wasn't doing the work in the community, that I don't think I'd be creating or be compelled to tell certain bodies of stories, to be very honest with you.
It's nice to hear, because often your actual day job could draw away from your work and your creativity, and I hear it doesn't. And Tal, let me ask you, Tal, you teach, but you teach more than photography. When we spoke earlier, you said you teach philosophy. How does all of that interact with your body of work? Does it embellish it? Does it inspire you? Or does it become, these students, what's your reaction?
No, I think that they become wonderful corollaries. I mean, a lot of this, like this fall, I'm teaching a course on identity, right? One course on identity and another course called Introduction to Decolonial Thought, right? Where we examine media and, the old images and just the way people think. But I find that photography figures very keenly in that, because we're looking at how people see themselves. I mean, ultimately, identity is either given or, it's either self-imposed or it's given, or we work at it. So a lot of it has to do with how people actually see themselves. And I use the camera to explore that. And because I use the camera to explore that, kind of like, certainly in this hemisphere, I work a lot in South America. When I come to a classroom, because I teach a course called The Arts in New York City every January. So it's 3 days a week, 2 days lecture, and 1 day visit to like the Met or the Guggenheim or what have you. So my students know that I'm in the field for real, working on projects, right? And so it allows them to know that they can do just as I do it, but it allows them to see themselves. And so it's a fine compliment that when I get to the classroom, I'm not just talking, I'm able to walk the walk. And I think that's so important, particularly in a lot of these communities in New York City, where a lot of our young people need to see themselves. And I talk about us being in this visual era, right? And so we have this deluge of images just coming at us from all angles. In that, unless people create the images of themselves, a lot of people still don't see themselves. So I'm, pretty much photographing communities on the periphery, and I teach about communities on the periphery and bring those peripheries to the center, right? Because ultimately, a lot of this is about centering humanity. And for a long time, photography, and even when we talk about the arts and high art and low art, a lot of it is very bastioned and ivory towered, if you will. And so photography becomes a bit more democratic, because any kid now can pick up a cell phone and work with that iPhone. Any kid can get a $100 Canon AE1 program, and pick up some film. And so, the being in the field and being abroad and being in the classroom, they work very well together.
Tal, let me ask you, Tyrone Brown Osborne in the chat dialogue asked a very interesting question for you. And I'll just read it out. What's the importance of being an artist documenting your community rather than being someone outside of that community doing the same thing?
I believe it brings, well, a couple of things. It brings, for the people you're documenting, it brings familiarity, and familiarity brings trust. but then also because you're from that community, you empathize in a way that an outsider will not, right? And so we have to think about lenses. Literally, you know, we work with lenses, but then the eyes and the mindset, these are lenses too. And so if you come from certain communities of, let's say, privilege and go into underprivileged communities, what kind of baggage do you take into those communities as to how you see those people? Do you dignify them? Do you see them on the same levels as yourself? Or are they simply novelties? Or are they just the hot next thing to put in some fancy magazine? You know, and so being able to come from a community and work within that community, you're working for the community. And so the level of trust, I can't explain it. I mean, if I talk about St. Kitts, when I walk the street, like people just show up and like, I don't even have to ask people to photograph them. I just hear, "Toe," you know, and people are like waving to me, you know, and that was 7 years ago. So I can only imagine now. But, you know, I would say that I've had similar experiences in Colombia. And, you know, I use my rudimentary Spanish to get around in Colombia, in Brazil, where, you know, I'm photographing a lot of Black women and women who identify as Black. So when they see me, someone who people see as Black also, they see someone who's on their side, a genuine ally. You know, and I'm photographing a hair story in Brazil. And if you know, I have hair under this hat, you know, and some people call it black hair, curly hair, kinky hair. And so I'm able to tell those stories because when those women see me, they see themselves, you know, and they trust that I will take care of them, you know, the way a Black man is taking care of a Black woman. And so it's super important. You don't necessarily have to be from a community, but some part of you must identify with that community honestly.
And certainly being a photographer, and I've had many friends who are, getting the subject, the person you're photographing, to be relaxed is a big deal. I know many people who will hide the camera and take photos because they don't want to get a reaction. And then when they do engage somebody, it's a very fine line of how you engage them, how they react, and then what you capture. So
Can I say something to that?
Of course.
Yeah, I don't hide the camera, you know, because the idea of taking the picture, for me, taking is tantamount to stealing sometimes, you know. So the idea for me is that we make the photograph. So when I deal with a subject, there is full complicity. I mean, I do some street photography that I keep to myself, but as far as telling people stories, it's super important that people are able to tell their stories. As much as I can help people tell their stories honestly and put them in the best light, no pun intended, I want to be able to do that. So even when we review images, and I do shoot film also, but certainly if I'm shooting digital, I'll say, hey, which one do you like? And I'll run through those images really quickly, right? And so it's really about, for me, photography is collaborative. You know, it's not.
I respect that. I respect what you're saying. And I think there's always two sides of how to approach it. And you make a strong point, and the fact that you actually engage them to look at your viewfinder and see that is interactive. Danny, I want to ask you a question. Somebody popped in a question into the chat. And while you answer the question and discuss it, feel free to screen share, Danny, and show some images of your work and talk about it. The question does come from Tyrone Brown Osborne and asks, Danny, how has your work changed or your approach changed since completing your MFA program? And one thing I might open up, and I'd say, what did you learn from your MFA program, or what did you not learn from your MFA program as well? And where was it?
Let me make sure nobody's on here that report back. Now let me stop. You know, the MFA was an amazing break for me to really just kind of think about my work. And again, you know, spending a lot of time like dealing with a lot of hard shit, like kind of stepping away from photography just enough, you know, to learn different mediums and play with different materials. So I took the last 2.5 years to kind of do that more than even take images with my camera. Even though I shoot like almost every day, I'm not considering that like bodies of work just yet. What it did do for me was that it kind of reminded me, not necessarily about my own work, but just, you know, like what art is considered, like, who's allowed to be an artist, and why I was like 40 years old before I went to study art, you know what I mean? Like all these kinds of barriers, or just concepts of like what an education is supposed to do. So what it reminded me of was that we have to own like all of our platforms. that I didn't see enough photographers of color that look like me, whose work was represented in those bodies at this program. And so something has to be different, and there has to be an alternative. That's what I learned. And so again, I dig deeper into my own bodies of work to talk about that and to hopefully create that. I don't think there's enough sometimes for us to just shoot anymore. We have to like own the company that holds the images in it, and that like, is the hardware to this whole system for it to change. And that's what I think about a lot more now, is like, what's the root of this stuff, and how do we own that, and how do we, springboard from there? So I don't know if that's about photography, or that's like life, or how do we change, social structures, but that's what I've been thinking a lot about for sure.
Well, ideally, it all sort of comes together. I hear your analogies talking about the eye as a lens. So it does come together,
Sure.
No question about it. I think what I hear from both of you is that you're not accepting the identity that is labeled upon yourselves, but you're creating an identity. And maybe the part of this show, this exhibit by En Foco, is to give voice to people, and for those people to help others see other identities and other definitions of themselves, which I think is very important. Because, even when you mentioned high and low art before, those are very, who made those rules? And I think
Exactly.
we're all realizing we can make whatever rules we want, and
Exactly.
you guys are engaging it. Danny, I'll let you go ahead.
Sure.
You're showing us some images.
Sure. Yeah, I just pulled up some images from the body of work that, again, is being featured currently on the Mundos exhibit. And this is a body of work that I've been working on now for, this particular part of it is maybe like 5 years in, but I've been documenting like the underground hip hop artists of the South Bronx now, and just, my community, even before I moved to the Bronx. Yeah, so I've been documenting these folks. And so this is a body of work about a radio show that happens live on Tuesday evenings called Gorilla Grooves Radio, and it's hosted by these guys over here. Let me go back. Hold on, let me take it back so you can kind of see. It's hosted by this guy Fred, DJ Fred Ones, and Rhinoceros Funk, and a couple of other folks. And again, these are some of my friends, and for years, again, trying to build these platforms, trying to continue platforms to kind of keep the presence of certain individuals alive, but even just to build camaraderie. And you look at a show like Gorilla Grooves Radio, which is hosted like right on in the South Bronx. It's like a couple blocks right from the bridge, and it's fastly gentrifying. But again, this is a space that on Tuesday evenings you get some of the most amazing artists of our generation coming together, and they get interviewed, and they share their work. And then in one space, and then in the other space, they're meeting, and they're talking, and they're building, and they're hanging out, and finding a time to heal, and finding a time to collaborate, and finding a time to be themselves. And if you could imagine a bunch of like 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, with names like Al Nizzi, or names like I don't know, like Merce, or like all of these names. For example, the gentleman on the screen right now, his name is Vice Versus. He passed away during COVID. This guy was very pivotal in the careers of a lot of people. And again, they may not get radio recognition, but they're out there performing all over the world to something called End of the Week, EO Dub. And again, this is what these guys do. This is all done for free. Nobody's getting paid for this stuff. Again, none of these artists are making, millions of dollars on records or being played on regular radio. This is kind of a tradition that we kind of grew up with in the 80s and the 90s, Stretch and Bobbito and WNYU and all these kinds of shows where you stayed up at 5 in the morning to listen to what was going to be the cool new song that you can play to your friends the day after. And so, we're still continuing that. And there's still people, again, that follow this type of music, that are big fans of it. And again, they get together. And again, we talk a lot about like Black Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff. And to be in a space where You know, you can trust each other, and you can be dignified as men of color, and you can give each other hugs, and you can, you know, talk about real stuff without anybody, you know, messing that up is very powerful, and it's very needed. And so this project, you know, for myself is a labor of love. It's again, these are my brothers, these are my sisters, you know, these are not people that are random, you know, these are people that I've come to know and admire, and again, you know, watch them grow throughout the years, and watch them develop as individuals, you know. You know, you see that, you know, KRS-One and Jay, you know, 2 generations, you know, coming together, you know, that's what it's about. You know, people like these, again, that otherwise would probably have disappeared, you know, in the miasma of artistry in New York City, but again, don't exist, you know. When we started doing this show, people were looking for live venues in the Bronx. There were no live venues doing live hip hop in the Bronx. I mean, it's absurd if you think about it. But that's why we started these functions, you know, to kind of bring these folks together. And for me, it's about taking, you know, time to document them and photograph them, and say, look, you know, we're alive, we're here, you know, we're human, we're beautiful, you know what I'm saying? We love each other, you know what I mean? We take care of each other, you know, we laugh, you know, we cry, you know, we're raising our own families, we celebrate life, and you know, that's what it's about ultimately, you know. That's what my work is about, you know. There's nothing else to it. It's about, you know, the most immediate person next to me, and those people typically look like these folks, and act like these folks, and it's important, you know. So this is, you know, this is what I wanted to show, because I think that, again, I think that whether or not Black people are human is still debated in this country, and it's heartbreaking, you know. And I wanted to kind of, you know, show that that's not the case, you know. And so I'm not gonna share my screen here. I'm gonna take this down so you can see it. But
nicely said, Danny.
How I think, you know.
Yep, you did it. I do want to say, yeah, that was very nice. We do claps and snaps, really cool. Somebody made a comment, Ken McFarland, and it's brilliant, nice and sweet, short and sweet. We don't take, we make. You don't take the identity thrown upon yourself. You make your identity. And I think also, Danny, seeing you photograph the music scene, and I saw Mears in there, a graffiti artist I know, a good friend who was head of 5 Points, and of course there's a whole issue on what happened at 5 Points, and he did so much good, and then artists wanted to kill him because they didn't get part of the money that was divvied out from what happened. But to see you integrating with music, I often find visual artists are sometimes separated, or 2-dimensional artists are separated from sculptors. The music industry is separated from the visual arts. It doesn't make sense to me. There should be a linkage, and it's nice to see you're doing real photography. There's no setup. There's no stage. I know some people take 5 hours to get the lights right. You are shoot and go. You want to capture sort of the life, the pulse of the heart of your community, and it comes right through. These are not about perfectly balanced, but your eye gets honed after you, like you say, you shoot every day. Your eye gets honed so that you can very quickly get that right rectangle, so to speak, and that rectangle that focuses your view. I'm going to ask Tao, put up some images that you want to talk about and discuss in your work, and I'll just let you run with it, Tao, and I'll look for questions that people have asked, and likewise, I'll ask as we go as well.
All right, so I'll share a couple from the Dos Mundos show, La Amiga Love, and then let's see where else we can go. If I go to my website, let's see.
And I do want to encourage, I do want to encourage anybody who wants to use the chat feature. If you want to type a question or a thought in there, feel free to do so. Sorry, Cal.
No worries. So let me just kind of flip through. These are people I grew up with. In this case, this is Patrick Jawande. He's about 5 years older than me, but he was the best. When it came to popping wheelies, he was the best ever. He could go for like a mile. And right now, and to see him as a grown man, obviously he's older than me, but just to see our evolution and the levels of trust and ease, right? And also, this is the pride of the people. So kind of wanted to communicate that also. I mean, she's walking along a country road, but when I asked her for the photograph, told her what I was, working on a document of our people, she just stood on the wall and you can see the pride in her, right? So the idea is to show people as dignified and also to show the beauty of the people. This is Brother Rainbow, and he's in the Dos Mundos show. So if you see these two buckets, he sells peanuts. He boils peanuts, which is pretty popular in our country. And he sells peanuts at like reggae concerts or during Carnival. And when I asked him for the portrait, he just got down, took off his hat, so his dreadlocks tumbled out, and he just looked at me. And that was it. And this is the energy of the people, right? And, to some people, he might look strange or be strange, but this is a human being in fullest capacity. These are also my people. So, growing up in the Caribbean, we have people from all backgrounds. So I'm just flipping through so you can get a sense of this particular project. But if I go to, let's go to Brazil, right? And I mentioned that I've been working, so for the past 4 years, I've been working on a book project in Brazil called Chaucabella Revela. In Portuguese, it means that here reveals her. And it's really how Black women in Brazil have taken ownership of their imagery and their self-esteem, mainly by wearing their hair naturally. And it might sound like a strange thing for people who, it's like, what's the big deal with hair? But when you think of the process of malicious colonization and how it infects the mind to make people even hate their very bodies. I mean, even just wearing your hair naturally. I mean, some of you have been to the store and you'll go to the aisle that says ethnic products. Well, the truth is everyone is ethnic. But why is a certain kind of hair normal and people of African descent, their hair is abnormal? All right, and we know we can attribute that to colonialism, but this project is to show the regularity of Black women and Black women asserting themselves. And so I photograph and I interview, so it's a visual ethnography, and the stories that mother passes to daughter, and someone mentioned to me, oh, their heads come together as a heart. And I was like, wow, but that's for other people to see, right? But this is me traveling so far through 6 different cities in Brazil so far, and interviewing Black women. So far I've photographed 115 women and interviewed them for this particular project. And it's been getting a great reception. But just imagine that in some spaces, these women are told to go do something with their hair, that their hair is ugly. And the parallels between Brazil and the United States and the Caribbean are immense, but bear in mind that no other country in the world has more people of African descent than Brazil. So 54% of the population of Brazil is of African descent, which means a lot of the women have hair like this naturally. But if you see the image of the Brazilian woman, she often has straight hair, I mean, she's a doctor. If you can see Marilea on the screen right now. And we're in America, a doctor walks in a room and like, oh, go do something with your hair. And usually it means to straighten the hair so it looks like a white woman's hair. But this is how Black people's hair grow naturally. So a lot of these portraits are just regularizing regularity. And it might seem like, a whole lot of to do, but just to be a natural self sometimes in the world is rebellion. All right. So this is a sample of Brazil.
Tal,
right?
I
Yes.
can't help but say in all your portraits, I see that people are proud. There's a lot of pride in them presenting themselves, and then, maybe the fact that you asked them, and then they, these look like people who are proud to be who they are.
That's the idea. And even as you mentioned pride, the lady on the screen, she's also a doctor, but 2 years before I took this photograph, she was diagnosed with cancer. And so she had a lot of beautiful hair, she said, but she lost it all. And, you know, she said to me, you know what, I have never felt as beautiful as I feel now. And I got the sense based on the rest of our conversation that she was not jiving. All right. So let me skip to this. Harlem in the time of Corona, which is my reaction, being in my Harlem apartment and zoomed up every day teaching and hearing these sirens go crazy. So early in April, after about 3 weeks in quarantine, I was like, I have to do something about this. And so I'm going to see what Harlemites look like, socially distant, masked up, and communicate their pride. And I'm going to make a document of this. And I thought that I would just do 21 and get it out of my system, but I think I've shot like 65 to date. But I've stopped photographing because the concentration now is to put this in a book form. So, you know, all hands on deck right now to get this into book form. And we want to put a document before the people. But once again, the idea is to photograph and interview. So everyone tells me what Harlem has been for them, like in this time of Corona. So these are stories about connection, right? And once again, my images, and we realize that images span the world instantaneously, and that's why we have Instagram, right? But, you know, for all the narratives about them and us and others and the othering that goes on, you know, like this is the mainstream and those people over there on the periphery, those people are Muslims and that's a woman and blah, blah. I mean, can we just not look at people and see their dignity? And so this is the image that I strive to make. And, you know, they say you're given lemons, you make lemonade. You know, I like to make a mint julep sometimes. And so if I'm in Harlem, I want people to see this image, whether if that person is in Brazil or Japan, and say, when I go to Harlem, I want to go to the New Ebony Hotel. You know, and so a bit of the environment comes into play because it certainly colors how the subject is framed.
I noticed in that photo having New Ebony. In one of your earlier shots, you had a woman and she was standing on cement, and the color in the cement was like her shoes. Again, that was chance, but it worked. And there was a white star, a 5-pointed star. So you're able to get these elements that are there that add to the meaning.
Right. I think that a lot of times we curse the things that are around us, not realizing that they're for our good. And my grandmother always said, you know, use what you have to get what you want. And so if this guy's cleaning a very luxe building, not too far from my own apartment, and, you know, everyone goes to the front of the building, you know, doctors, lawyers, some of them don't look like him racially, but yet he keeps this building spick and span. Why would I not want to communicate that this is what he does and that he does it with pride? I mean, it's only natural, right? And so, but all this is Harlem. So kind of like, how do we get rid of like some of the stereotypes? You know, I mean, all these people exist in Harlem. And so I walk around, I see what's there. And if I can stop someone and say, hey, let's make this portrait right here. This is what I'm about. That's what I do.
I think you get rid of the stereotypes by doing exactly what both of you are doing. You're presenting a new image for people to take in, and your photographs speak to it, no question about it. I want to go back to Danny, and I want to just change gears a little. And you mentioned Instagram, and I like that you mentioned it's instant. It sort of feeds our 5-second mentality. And of course, if you post on Instagram, within 3 days, nobody's really looking at that post anymore. It's very of the moment. Danny, how do you feel Instagram, social media, how do you feel it helps or it hinders you? Is it like a nightmare that you have to go and be on all these different platforms? You have to go around liking certain things that maybe you don't even like just so you stay in the feed and see that person? What's your reaction to, the new way, and, what are the benefits as well for you, Danny?
I suck traditionally at social media, which is again not something that you want to say when you're like an artist, and because again that's like where people are finding you nowadays, right? And it makes sense, so it is a platform. I think that I've used it sparingly or a lot better in the last couple of months in anticipation for today, and I think some people logged on because I did some decent social media. So it is a tool. I think, and it's always been a tool for me for my art or for my photography. And like, again, you don't see pictures of my children, or you don't see like my lunch, like social media is out of control that way. But I think that it is a great space to get a portfolio up, and to show, maybe your technique or your style, or, if you're, doing something interesting or meeting somebody interesting. I think that it is a great tool. Again, as long as you stay away from like, what's on the table. I don't know, like the other stuff just eludes me. Like people's personal stuff just it goes over my head. I don't know. I'm sorry.
But Danny, it's interesting how you started off by saying, and it was a great line, I suck at social media. And it shows you that you have the weight thrust upon you that you're not good enough at it. And it's almost a burden in that sense, because you're a complex artist, your photography and all the work you're doing, just being the executive director of The Point is a big deal in itself, and to be able to continue with a body of work. Danny, tell me a little bit about the images I see behind you.
Sure. Oh, that image there is you know what? That's one of the folks that hold up. That is actually an artist. That's Agustin. And Agustin just passed away like early this year, like right before COVID hit. Agustin Cruz, and he's an artist, sculptor, and he lived in Hunts Point for many years, and did amazing bodies of work. With pieces of wood, he would, salvage wood and do these amazing sculptures. And so I met him at the Point. That was where he was using the workshop there, and I got to photograph him. I think in 2012 or 2013, him and his aunt, and that was probably like one of the last rolls of film that I shot, a black and white film actually, when I photographed him before I switched over to digital. But again, my quest to always shoot again people around me that I think are amazingly talented and interesting, and again whose portrait is necessary. And when he passed, he was a very reclusive individual. Didn't have many friends and family. So when he passed, I was so fortunate to have a nice treasure trove to share with the family he did have left, and I was able to share that wealth of images with them. And that's what the photography is for. That's what the tool has always been for. It's like, how do we capture these moments with folks and keep these histories alive and use it to further that. And so yeah, I don't know. It's one of those stories again that I meet like 20 of these folks a day, hanging out in a place like the Point, because it is such a creative space. And it makes it again where like your work's your job's blur, like your passions completely blur, and the person who you're working on with services and providing a space for becomes your friend, and then you're documenting them, and it's this whole thing that goes back and forth. That say I was speaking about this trust, this reciprocal relationships that allow you to look at somebody's life as art and to translate that and to give that back to them and say, look, this is what I see. This is who you are, behind my lens, and thank you. And, that's always been the approach. I'm traditionally very shy. Like I used to be the young boy in class who would get in trouble for not talking, because I was too quiet. They thought there was something wrong with me. And so, the style of photography that, where you go off and you stop people, and like I'm terrified of stopping people on the street for their portrait. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm terrified of that. Still, the rejection, all of it plays out. I get anxiety, and so again, my ability to meet folks and spend time with them and years with them, honestly, before I even take a picture, sometimes is very important to my process. And again, that really is a larger part of my of again working with the community and being patient and just kind of seeing the world in a certain way,
On a technical question for you, Danny, you mentioned shooting with film, more traditional, old school, so to speak, and now, of course, digital. What would you say are the benefits or the disadvantages of either? Do you miss one, or do you find digital works for you?
Yeah, I was a diehard, film person for a while, black and white. It was hard for me at some point to see beyond like light and shadow. I don't know. I wasn't, I was interpreting color as shade, so I was stuck in that for a bit. The digital, what it allows me to do, especially with the more recent bodies of work, is tell us something a little more colorful, and you can see more movement. I think so. For me, switching over to digital was important because it is about, again, giving people, letting people see the images quicker for one. It is cheaper, there's a lot of advantages obviously, but for this body of work, it's important to kind of see the colors and the mood that's set with the kinds of different lighting in the room, like all of that plays out. So I think that for me, at this point, I'm strictly shooting digital, and I'm fine with it. If I wanted to switch something to black and white, I don't feel it's bad, but I rarely do it. I do it maybe sometimes just to kind of look at my editing process and see where my shadows fall. But besides that, I'm cool with digital. And again, I'm able to, if I shoot a friend, I'm able to send them, an image in 2 days as opposed to like 3 weeks. And now you see how hard it is even to get access to labs now. I mean, I'm fortunate I have a photo studio at the point, and if I needed to, do film, I can do it there. But I mean, where else can you develop your own rolls of film? It's like it's almost impossible. Yeah, so a lot of advantages for sure.
Tal, let me ask you similarly, how have you found the change? I mean, did you originally shoot with traditional film? And, if so, has something been lost or has something been gained by now working digitally?
Well, I shoot both. Most of my work is digital, but there are particular projects that I shoot. Two projects I shoot strictly medium format, and another I shoot like 35 millimeter tri-X. So that has to be developed, right? And it's interesting because I have like 50 rolls of film to develop right now. It's like I have to get this to the Fujifilm store, because they had a store at 23rd Street. And literally, when I thought of going in, they sent me an email saying they were closing down. So I have all that film right now in a plastic bag. I used to have, I still have a developer down in Chambers, but since the pandemic, I've not been down that way. So the advantage of digital is its immediacy. So, you shoot digital and, you can see it instantly, right? But what happens sometimes is that you have so many images to go through. Now, when I shoot film, particularly if I'm shooting medium format on a 645, then I have 15 shots to a roll of film. So it means that I tend to take my time more, and because the film is precious and expensive. So we want to make that film count. Whereas digital can be like, I mean, I don't shoot like that, but some people do. All right. I try to shoot digital the same way I shoot film. You slow it down, you take your time, you make the photograph. So, if you're photographing for clients, if I'm photographing like private commissions for a client, most times I'm shooting digital, and that goes out within 2 weeks. But if I'm shooting for myself, I have no pressures on myself except those that I put on myself. So, but as far as shooting film, I've been using Fujifilm for years, and they have these algorithms that mimic the same films that I used to shoot. So I can make their black and white look like a tri-X or a portrait, so it works well in both cases. I find though that film has a warmth to it. People say it's like a chemical reaction, whereas digital, I guess, is like an electronic reactions, but they're all reactions. And if you can put them in their spaces, then I think that you can make equally great work. It's like, no matter the camera, just give me a camera and I'll do my best with whatever that camera is.
Sometimes that's the challenge as the artist, to work within parameters, constrained parameters. I enjoy shooting with old Polaroids because there's nothing you can do with them. You just like press the button. And so you're really in a tight space to try and make something good. Tal, let me ask you, I think one of the hardest things as a photographer is to be able to pick amongst your photographs which one is more moving and which one captures something. And I'm going to put you on the spot. And Danny, you got to head up for this. Tal, show us some of your work. And I want you to show us what you are most proud of, what you think are your most compelling images, and why they are.
Okay, so you're really putting me on the spot, but
Well, go to your Instagram if you like, or your face. You know what I'm saying? When
let me see if I can get to my website. Let me just see if I can get into let's go to my Afro Latina project, and
I know myself when I do photographs and a bunch of them, it's hard for me to pick out the one that I think is best. And you should know in the record industry, there were a lot of hits that were very famous that were almost left off the album because
right.
they didn't think they were going to be good songs. So I want to see what your eye sees.
I think I like this image a lot. You know, she's shown up posters and people have wanted to buy this image, but she's Puerto Rican. She was born in Cataño, this kind of like slightly west of San Juan. And this is part of my Afro Latina project, which the idea was to kind of canvas Latin America and get Black women in these countries to speak on what it means to be, because when you have, you know, the image of the so-called Latina and Latinx more recently, it's usually, you know, it might be a Rita Moreno or Jennifer Lopez in the more modern, or Sofia Vergara, but the truth is millions of these women made up what is called Latin America. And so she's as Puerto Rican as it gets, all right? And, you know, I met her at a street festival and I told her what I was trying to do. And she said, you know what, let's meet some days from now. Can I wear what I want? And I said, sure thing. And she brought this outfit. She was wearing a white top, but then she took the purple out of the bag. And incidentally, there were purple flowers in the background. I was like, you know what? This is going to be a photograph. And then there's the light coming in through the trees. So that's almost like a halo, but like a reverse halo. And, you know, to hear her talk about stories of, you know, racism, even amongst Puerto Ricans, and what she's heard from other Puerto Ricans who didn't think she was Puerto Rican enough. And she actually used to dance for Hector Lavoe, you know, the famous salsa singer, you know, and so I won't bother to get into those stories now, but even just facing like racism or, you know, whispers backstage from Blanquitas, white Puerto Rican women who thought that, well, what is she doing here? And then when she replied in Spanish, you're like, oh, lo siento, we didn't know you were one of us, you know, and that sort of thing. So I think that to be able to show these kinds of stories and have the backstory, but also make that human connection. Because what I've found is that making portraits does more, and she's Costa Riqueña, she's from Costa Rica, but she's also a Spanish speaker, right? But for some people, she might not be a Latina. So when you think about people striving to identify themselves, right? You know, it really is this constant striving. And this is, I like these images because these images brought me to the attention of En Foco. This is in San Basilio de Palenque in Colombia, right? Which is like about 2 hours from Cartagena. And these people are the Palenqueros, so they're the descendants of some of the first Black folk to escape slavery in the New World. So they escaped Cartagena, which is like major port of Colombia, 500 years ago, and journeyed days into the jungle to find their own space. And so this is the space. I went to that area and spent some time with them.
I've got to say, this image holds something strong. The way on the left side you have that sort of abstract, flat, you know, melange of yellow, white, and pink, and then her, you know, very strong central figure, and also right. you have sort of a rhombus that's a little bit off, so you have a dynamic composition here, and then her hair, the way it's stiff and it does like the little curve. You've got a lot of play going on in there. In the one that you put up first of the older woman, I think what I got from it is it's the strength of the subject that comes through. And sometimes it may be, you know, that woman, there's something in her. and you've captured it. It could be that the subject matter is as important as you are in this photograph.
Well, for me, it was very important to communicate her strength. You know, as I get older, I realize that a lot of people are dealing with a lot of things in the world. And when I talk about mental health, and I realize how much a positive representation of yourself can be key to your mental health. I mean, we are in a time now, we're in this visual age where like there's this digital dumping ground of images. So there are millions of images. I mean, you know, Danny, you made the point earlier of how like, you know, 15 seconds and then people move on to the next thing. You know, I mean, think about it. The first picture I have of my mother, she was 22 years old. So literally, when I would go back home and people would ask me about my mother, they'd talk about how pretty she was as a teenager. I do not have such an image, right? Because coming from my people in St. Kitts, we weren't destitute, but I come from so-called ghetto people, you know, and Rasta people. So in the 70s, a lot of images were not made of certain people. And, you know, when I think about it, sometimes you just had one image upon which to fixate. And so you come into a room and you see yourself on the wall, and if it's a great image of yourself, that's how you see yourself. And particularly teaching young people, dealing with young people these days, and even grown folk, like, oh, I don't look good from this angle. I don't like this about me. And so you realize the power of an image as far as mental health, as far as self-esteem. I mean, the overlaps are tremendous.
You know, something you said hit home with me. My mother passed away about a month ago, and I went through old family photos. And in those photos, I saw parts of her character and personality that I didn't know. I saw her when she was 6 and 10 and 15. And, you know, a lot is put forth in those photos. You could see the way she holds herself, the face, the arm. There's a lot of tells. And I think I got to know a part of my mother. And I lived with my mother for, 20 years, and I knew her for 60 years. And, I learned something new from a photograph. I can't emphasize as how important your work is. As many images that are out there, the images that you are adding are as valued a view, and unfortunately, a view that's left out by the WASP, the White Anglo-Saxon Protestant view, the very white world. Even women's views have been left out, except for maybe the last 20 years. So, you're doing important work that, as we discussed earlier, it has impacts that go way beyond what you know and touches a lot of people. I want to move back to Danny and ask Danny that same question about, amongst your work, what's one of the pieces that you like very much in yours, and how do you discern what you feel are your best photographs and why? What sort of makes them best? Not an easy question.
I mean, I think for this project, I think because it is personal in a certain kind of way, where like I'm meeting a lot of people that I was a fan of their music and their art for many years. I think all of the pictures are good. And I'm like emotionally attached to every moment that I spent with some of these people. And so what I'll share, I'm gonna share this one image, and keeping in the, I guess in the theme that Taya had with the elders, I'm gonna show you this particular image here. Can you guys see this one here? Can you see this? You guys can see this, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Brother Abeosun from The Last Poets. Their group from the 60s, poets, musicians, artists, activists, revolutionaries, and I guess their style of music, their message kind of predates what we consider hip hop, if you will. And so meeting somebody like this is like, I don't know, it's almost like, like if there was a Mount Rushmore for like, culture and how it kind of spread and the people that kind of the progenitors of it, I would point to this gentleman and his team and the folks around him, the Gil Scott Herons, folks like that were doing again, that were presenting the same thing that we're doing here visually. They were presenting it with their music, and really inspiring a lot of visual and all the kinds of art, and really people and movements. And so, you know, I took this photograph. I think this photograph is maybe from 2000 and I'm gonna say 16 or 17. And again, it's on a Tuesday night. You know, he had come in with Tommy Abney to do an interview, and they were gonna be interviewed. And he's sitting there again, like, you know, 3 or 4 feet away from me. And here's this gentleman, and maybe like I guess his 60s or 70s at this point, you know, wearing these big, you know, Reebok pumps, you know, sitting on this couch in the middle of the South Bronx, and he's like staring up, and he's wondering, and you know, you know, to be able to breathe the same air and like wonder in the same room as this person is kind of like a dream come true in some ways. And again, I think a lot about, you know, what he's seen and you know, what he's talked about and his work. And I thought that I caught him at a moment maybe where he was reflecting on that, and maybe he was thinking about, you know, another poem, or maybe he was thinking about the state of the world or whatever, maybe, you know, his Instagram feed, whatever. But to be able to be in that room and to kind of see that and to be present for that, and to again capture a photograph of that again that I could share with my children one day, or that I could even share in this type of forum, even though the floor is messy and, you know, and there's like 2 kinds of rugs, and, you know, whatever, there's a flashlight on the window. You know, it was important for me to take the photo. And again, I feel a real strong connection to this, because this could be, you know, very easily, you know, a family member. You know, you know, this guy looks a lot like my uncle, you know, Eddie, who passed in the 80s and stuff like that. And I could imagine him being around the same age as this gentleman. So, you know, just that reverence for history and for the people, again, that kind of, you know, help shape my own imagination is very important to me, to be able to capture that. And so it is one of my favorite images. In many ways, it's just this human person, you know, who's still superhuman in my opinion, but in some ways it's just a man, you know, an individual sitting here, you know, has same thoughts and wears Reebok pumps like the rest of us, you know. I think that's important, you know.
Danny.
Yeah.
Yo.
What happened?
Dude has these gatherings at his house on weekends.
Yeah.
It's to die for, bro. He lives over on Morningside Heights.
So there you go.
Does he still do
We
that?
gotta go over there, T.
I think he does, bro.
Right.
Abio Dune is like
Yeah.
the coolest, oldest
Yes,
cat
he
to
is.
hang out with.
Yes,
I mean, yeah, he's so spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? We're gonna crash that party. Everybody's invited. Let's go.
Yes. All right.
You know, what I hear that's really nice, Danny, is I hear you respect the subject matter so that you're excited to be photographing them, and as you say, in the room with them. And I know you're not concerned with formal elements, but I will point out, and I almost said it earlier, there is usually and often a reflection in some of your photographs, and that sort of works well to open up another window. But it's nice to see a photographer sort of excited by his subject matter. And, you know, in ways, you and Tao are very similar and very different. You know, you're presenting things that are not presented, that are important to be shown, but you're doing them in different ways. Tao, I almost want to ask you, do you have a classical background training? Because you're giving us not strictly center-focused portrait, but very balanced photographs, minimal composition. Whereas Danny, you're catching the room, and like you say, the light's hitting it. I don't care. To me, that adds to it. These are, at first when we spoke, I thought you guys were very similar, and you are. And I think the point is, you can be very similar and very different at the same time. And I got to echo the point when you said the subject matter, Tao, the woman was Spanish, and they weren't accepting her. And then when they heard she was Puerto Rican, they accepted her. We have too many walls built up around us about who is us and who is not us. And it's, you know, labels can be very bad. They're very good if you got to like put a sticker on something, but we're humans. We're basically all sapiens, Homo sapiens. We're just, you know, all lizards are like each other, and we're just like lizards, but we're humans with 4 or more appendages. So we are very much the same. On the other hand, I grew up in suburbia, very entitled, no debt when I came out of college. Yes, a family business to go into. There are so many different things, but, you know, to quote Shakespeare, you know, prick us, do we not bleed? You're all speaking about family. You're talking about, and there's an extended family. It's a point we bring up in our discussions here. We have our sons and our mothers, that family, but this is a family here now. This is a family of people interested in the arts, interested in this dialogue. We can talk about things, and someone else says, oh, I love that kind of film that you photograph with. And we can get each other, even though we've never seen each other. And I think it's important to build these other families, these other communities, and not be exclusive. I hate nationalism because it means the other people aren't in our nation. And, you know, the Olympics, be wary of things like that, where we're competing, even football. You know, it's, you're opening up a different world. You're setting up different parameters. I want to go to, let's say, Danny, and let you add some closing points, anything you like. Tao as well. I do want to say the comments that people have put in have been great. They've said very nice things about both of you and even myself. I want to thank everybody, and for all your questions have been really good and dead on. But I'll start with you, Danny. Wrap up anything. Show us some images maybe and talk about them. We'll keep it nice and simple, and then we'll go to you, Tao.
Hold up. Sorry about that. Hold up. Let me try to navigate this thing here. I don't know. I think, you know, again, I want to thank everybody for joining the call, and friends and family for joining in, and new folks again. I think this is, you know, kind of like why this body of work exists, and why I decided to shoot this, because I knew at some point in time, you know, it would be really relevant, and that we would have to talk about a lot of these issues, and not just talk about them because we're you know, talking about deficits, or we're talking about, you know, what's incomplete, you know, because we want to celebrate. And so I want to take the time to thank, you know, everybody who's let me photograph them for this project, because I've shot maybe several hundred people and some cats for this project, and you know, again, people giving me access to you know, their physical appearance, and letting me you know, meet them and photograph them, and be a fanboy is a big deal to me, and being a part of a community is a big deal to me. So I just want to acknowledge that, that, you know, again, none of this stuff is done alone. It's done in a vacuum. Again, I don't do any of this because I'm trying to be a famous photographer. I just really just want to be in the room. And I just want to let folks know, again, if you want to see some of my work, I'll put my link on the chat. But check out my website, you know, again. And also I got to promote this because it's very important. You know, COVID hit right when we were about to graduate from this MFA program. So this Wednesday, our show that was supposed to happen last May is going to open up, and I'll put the information on the chat as well, at the Michael Foley Gallery. If folks are in the Lower East Side from the 23rd to the 29th, please come and check it out. And support the work. And again, you know, continue to build communities and continue to challenge, you know, the norm. And again, I want to thank, you know, folks that, you know, traditionally would not, you know, give a crap about underground hip hop to come talk and listen to it, to sit down today and learn from it a little bit, and get a glimpse into our world. And so again, I want to thank you guys too, because that's part of this whole process. You know, the camera only takes us so far. You know, it's the dialogue behind it, and the community that we can build with each other for this to move forward. And this is, you know, bigger than art with an A. You know, this is life with an L. And we got to keep doing that, you know, for the sake of this, of our world and our children and the animals and everything else that we seem to mess up every time we touch stuff. I'm gonna stop talking now.
No, that's
Pete,
great.
thank you so much.
That was great, Danny. Really was nice. Very nice. Tao, go ahead, wrap us up. Before Tao goes, I will say we're on every Monday. Join us. You can present your art on a regular Monday. This was a unique presentation. We're the ATOA. We've been around for over 45 years. This is how we do things now, given COVID and what's going on. And this works as well. It shows you you know, we're creative animals. We can find solutions. We'd all like to be in touch in a room. There's nothing like seeing someone. All the little motions mean so much. But this works too. And I thank you all for coming. I'm going to let you, Tao, sort of, you know, show us something and talk about maybe something different or anything you like at all. And I do want to thank both of you. Our most valuable commodity is time. That is our limited commodity. I'm 60 and a month, and in a day, I'm 60 and a month in a day, and this moment is gone. So for all the time Danny and Tao have given us now and all their prep for this, and of course, a life of photography, and for all of you who have taken out an hour and 20 or whatever, your time is valuable, and we appreciate that. And that's what sort of builds together. Maybe it's time stitched together, and it's time for some new time to be stitched together for people to see. Take it away, Tao.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and it's been a wonderful talk. Barry, this talk is very international. I see at least one person from Brazil. Boa noite, Debbie. Happy to see you, right? So let me just share something. Made me think as Danny talked about the future. Let's see. I feel like sometimes it's hard to see stuff on my own website. I'm not seeing it. Kind of like trying to scroll down a bit, but hold up.
Take your time. One of the nice things here, we're always in a rush. If the car and the light turns green and you don't go in 3 seconds, we don't want to kill them. This is an opportunity we don't want to kill. We just want to, we can breathe and relax. You'll get it.
Let's see. So it's I'm not seeing it. It's called daddying, but somehow I can't pull it up on my screen. It's on my website, but somehow my screen isn't scrolling. I don't know if I can make it smaller. Okay. Yep. Let's see.
I do see the show Das Mundos is going to be at Stony Brook University next fall. I know Juanita Lanzo is it, and I know Bill Aguado, and many people are involved. This show is getting a lot of legs and is really traveling around. And it's a show that should travel around. That's really the point.
Right. So you know what? I'll just go back because it is there, but somehow my screen isn't allowing me to go to slide down. So you know, unless Barry, you could find it. But since we are in limited time, let me just flip through. So this is all in Colombia. But since it is the work that brought, and so this is in a place where most people don't speak English, but the universality of, you know, people talking about lives being important. And I'm not talking about a political movement, I'm talking about a human movement. And so as, you know, people say things like Black Lives Matter, but in Brazil, they say, vidas negras importam, you know, and so you see that a lot of the energies that we try to bring out, the dignity of people, they are universals, right? And so, you know, we're not just here to make pretty pictures. I mean, like Danny said, we're definitely accentuating the positive, but and we're not showing lack. What we are showing is, in fact, abundance and fullness. I think that if we see each other in these sorts of ways, then we'll treat each other a lot better. And ultimately, these are the images that I strive to make. When I make a portrait of someone, I say, hey, let's make something that you could be proud of 50 years from now. If there were no other photograph of you, let's make something that people can be proud of years from now. And so that's really where I stand. I mean, someone asked earlier about, do we make prints? As much as possible, I give prints to the people that I photograph, as much as possible. I mean, that is always the idea. And I'm talking about like 16 by 24 prints. I mean, we go big sometimes, you know. So, you know, photography is super important for me because we live in a visual time. So for instance, you know, we can make all these divisions about people, but if we go out and we photograph, we're photographing human beings. And I think that if we see each other more as human beings, we will have a much better world. But what has happened is that for a long time, some people are human and some people are not. Some people are human and some people are 60% human. Some people are human and some people are beasts. Some people are human and some people are animals. And I think that photography allows for an obliterating of that sort of hierarchy of who is this and who is what. Because for me, I'm looking at eyes and hands, and you know, they say eyes are windows to the soul. So if you will, I'm looking to capture the soul of that person, to put it before the rest of humanity so we can see, well, you know what? We are all, and we don't want to go into what's trite and what's cliche, but we are all worthy of respect, right? And we are all worthy of being treated as human beings, unless we, you know, we violate egregiously, right? And even then, it still comes before jury. So that's really what it is for me. I mean, these my photographs are about a human document. It's a human experience. As I've said, I mean, I don't even call myself a photographer, you know, but photographs are what I use to show humanity. So
very nicely said. Very nicely said, Tao and Danny. And I think this idea that it's for the future, that what you're doing now is to help the next generation. I saw in your photographs, Tao, some children, and there's some magic in a child's eye that sometimes, you know, the many moons that pass as we grow dims that light in our eyes, but it's obvious in kids, and you capture that. And I think to your point, you guys are working to shape a new future, a new world that's inclusive, that's not judgmental, and that sees we're all valid. And sort of, you know, so your point about the hair, that's a direct point. I mean, the idea that you'd have to straighten it to be white man acceptable, you know, that's something really messed up. And
preposterous, actually.
Yeah.
When we think about it, I mean, we have so much work to do to dismantle all of the nonsense that we've inherited. And just imagine that some people have lived for 400 years with that sort of legacy. So when, you know, the work that so many people have to do when it comes to self-esteem, it requires a heavy amount of psychology and medicine. But if we can go back and see the roots of this craziness, because that's really what it is. You know, I mean, we have a lot of people in this chat. Just imagine if all these white women in this chat lived the life of wearing afros so that they could mimic black women's hair. That's tantamount to what a lot of black women have had to live with for a good 150 years since they invented the ironing comb, and, you know, legacies of good hair and bad hair and ethnic hair and all these kinds of things. And you realize, if you're a critical thinker, you realize how foolish a lot of it really is. But we've normalized foolishness. We've normalized foolishness for years and years and years. So for me, my photography is about smashing those crazy legacies, right? These crazy inheritances. So that's what we're about.
Very nice. I want to thank you all. Thank everybody. Again, we're ATOA, the Artist Talk on Art. This was Danny Peralta and Tao Battice. Beautiful presentation, guys. Tao Battice, sorry. I keep getting your name wrong, Tao.
That's all right.
But I feel like I know you. I know you on a deeper level. And Danny, it's been a pleasure to get to know both of you. Keep doing the work you're doing. It's important work. It really is. And I know no matter what I say, you guys are going to keep doing it. You've got that inner engine. There's no question about it. And both of you speak brilliantly. And as you go on, you just pop out all these great little one-liners that are really packed richly. And it's a pleasure to hear them. So thank you all. Come again, everybody. Every Monday night, you get an opportunity to present. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Tao.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Man.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, family.
Peace.
Familia.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Eloise.
Really amazing, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks from Daryl Ann. Thanks. It was really great. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Bye.
Oh, you're large,
Bye.
brother. You're large. Ken McFarlane, Kenyatta.